Zara pressed her face against the cold metal wall of the transport ship, watching the stars blur past as tears rolled down her violet cheeks. The medical examination results still burned in her memory like acid. Genetically incompatible for breeding purposes, the cold voice of the Corvani medical officer had announced. Physical defects make her unsuitable for the reproduction program. The other females in her group had been selected within hours of their arrival at the breeding station. Their perfect bone structure, flawless skin, and ideal reproductive organs made them valuable commodities in the galactic slave trade. But Zara's slightly shorter stature, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident, and her inability to bear multiple offspring per cycle had sealed her fate. Now she sat in the cargo hold of a merchant vessel, bound for the outer rim colonies where rejected females were sold as manual laborers. The Corvani trader, Vex, had purchased her for barely a fraction of what the breeding females cost. She was damaged goods, nothing more than a tool to be used until she broke. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Zara's stomach lurched. Through the small porthole, she could see a blue and green planet growing larger by the minute. Earth, the humans called it. She had heard whispers about this species during her time at the breeding station. The other races spoke of humans with a mixture of fear and confusion. They fight for things that make no profit, one Corvani guard had muttered. They risk their lives for creatures they barely know. Strange beings. The ship's landing thrusters fired, and Zara gripped the safety harness as they descended through the atmosphere. She had no idea what awaited her on this human world, but it could hardly be worse than the breeding stations or the labor camps. The cargo bay doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, and bright sunlight flooded in. Zara squinted against the light as Vex's voice boomed across the hold. "Move, slave! Your new owner is waiting!" Zara stumbled forward on shaking legs, her chains clanking with each step. The gravity here was slightly heavier than she was used to, making her movements feel clumsy and awkward. As she emerged from the ship, she saw a small group of humans waiting near a wheeled transport vehicle. The human who stepped forward was unlike anything she had expected. He was tall but not imposing, with kind brown eyes and gentle features. His clothes were simple but clean, and he moved with an easy confidence that spoke of someone comfortable with himself. "Marcus Chen," he said, extending his hand to Vex. "I believe you have something for me." Vex's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. Indeed, human. One female, slightly damaged but still functional for basic labor tasks. The price we discussed? Marcus nodded and handed over a small device that beeped when Vex scanned it. "Payment confirmed, though I should mention slavery was abolished on Earth centuries ago. She'll be working for wages, not chains." The Corvani trader's eyes widened in disbelief. "You jest, surely. She is property, purchased legally under galactic commerce law." "Galactic law doesn't apply on Earth," Marcus replied calmly. "She's free the moment she steps foot on our soil." Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation, but he said nothing more. The profit was already in his account, and arguing with humans about their strange customs was rarely worth the effort. Marcus turned to Zara, and she instinctively flinched, expecting a blow or harsh command. Instead, he knelt down so they were at eye level, and spoke in a gentle voice she had never heard directed at her before. "My name is Marcus. I know this must be frightening for you, but you're safe now. No one will hurt you here." Zara stared at him in confusion. Was this some kind of trick? In her experience, males who purchased females always had the same intentions. But something in his eyes seemed different, genuine. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible after months of being told to stay silent. "You don't have to understand right now," Marcus said softly. "Just know that you're not property anymore. You're a person, with rights and choices. He stood and gestured toward the transport vehicle. "Would you like to come with me? I have a place where you can rest and recover. Food, clean water, medical care if you need it." Zara looked around desperately. The Corvani ship was already preparing for departure, and she had nowhere else to go. But this human's offer seemed too good to be true. There had to be a catch. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Marcus smiled sadly. "Nothing you're not willing to give. I run a rehabilitation center for people in situations like yours. My only goal is to help you heal and find your own path forward." Despite every instinct screaming that this was a trap, Zara found herself nodding. She had nothing left to lose, and something about this human felt different from every other male she had encountered. The journey to Marcus's facility took about an hour through winding mountain roads. Zara sat in the passenger seat, marveling at the lush green forests and clear blue streams they passed. She had never seen a world so full of life and color. "It's beautiful," she murmured, forgetting for a moment to stay silent. "Yes, it is," Marcus agreed. "This part of the mountains has been protected for over 200 years. We believe in preserving natural beauty for future generations." The concept was foreign to Zara. In her experience, powerful beings took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. The idea of protecting something simply because it was beautiful made no sense. They turned down a gravel road that led to a cluster of wooden buildings nestled among tall trees. As they approached, Zara could see other females moving freely around the grounds. Some were working in gardens. Others sat in groups talking and laughing. None wore chains or bore the marks of abuse she was accustomed to seeing. "This is Cedar Haven," Marcus explained as he parked the vehicle. "It's a place for survivors to heal and learn new skills. Everyone here has been through trauma of some kind." A human female approached as they got out of the vehicle. She was older, with silver hair and warm eyes that crinkled at the corners. Her movements were confident and purposeful. "This must be Zara," she said with a gentle smile. "I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the facility director. We've prepared a room for you." Zara looked between Marcus and Sarah, still unable to process what was happening. "I don't understand. What do you want from me in return?" Sarah's expression grew sad. "Nothing, dear. This is what humans call charity. We help because it's the right thing to do, not because we expect something back." The concept was so alien to Zara's experience that she felt dizzy. In her world, every action had a price. Every kindness came with strings attached. But these humans seemed genuinely different. Marcus noticed her distress and gently touched her shoulder. "I know it's a lot to take in. Why don't we show you to your room? You can rest and we'll talk more later." They led her to a small but comfortable cabin with a real bed, clean sheets, and a window overlooking the forest. There was even a private bathroom with running water and soap that smelled like flowers. "This is all for me?" Zara asked in disbelief. "All yours," Sarah confirmed. "Meals are served in the main building, but there's also a small kitchen here if you prefer to eat alone while you're adjusting." Marcus set a small device on the bedside table. "This is a communicator. If you need anything day or night, just press the button and someone will come. No questions asked." As they prepared to leave, Zara called out desperately, "Wait! I still don't understand. What's the catch? What do I have to do?" Marcus paused in the doorway and looked back at her with infinite patience. "The only thing you have to do is heal. Take as much time as you need. When you're ready, we can help you learn new skills or find work that interests you. But there's no timeline, no pressure." After they left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, staring around the room in shock. For the first time in her adult life, she was alone by choice, not locked away as punishment. The silence wasn't oppressive, but peaceful. She walked to the window and looked out at the forest. A small animal with a bushy tail scampered up a tree, and birds sang in the branches. Everything seemed so alive, so free. That night, she slept in a real bed for the first time since childhood. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and she could smell something delicious cooking nearby. For just a moment, she forgot where she was and started to panic, expecting the harsh voice of a guard or the crack of a whip. Instead, there was a gentle knock at her door. "Zara, it's Sarah. I brought you some breakfast if you're interested." Zara opened the door tentatively and found Sarah holding a tray with fresh fruit, warm bread, and some kind of hot beverage that smelled amazing. "You didn't have to," Zara whispered. "I wanted to," Sarah replied simply. "Mind if I come in? I thought you might have some questions." As they sat together eating breakfast, Sarah explained more about Cedar Haven and its mission. She spoke of concepts that seemed impossible to Zara: dignity, choice, self-determination, the idea that someone could live their entire life without being owned or controlled by another. "It will take time to believe it's real," Sarah said gently. "All our residents go through the same adjustment period, but I promise you, this is not a dream or a trick. You're free now, and we're here to help you figure out what that means for you." Outside the window, Zara could see Marcus working in a garden with several other residents. He looked up and waved when he noticed her watching, his face breaking into that same gentle smile she remembered from their first meeting. For the first time in years, Zara felt something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. 3 weeks had passed since Zara's arrival at Cedar Haven, and she still flinched every time someone approached her unexpectedly. But slowly, gradually, she was beginning to understand that these humans meant what they said about freedom and choice. Marcus had visited her every day, never pushing conversation but simply being present. Sometimes he brought books with pictures of Earth's various regions. Other times he shared stories about human history and culture. Today, he had asked if she wanted to join him for a walk through the forest trails. "I've never walked anywhere just for pleasure," Zara admitted as they followed a winding path through towering trees. "Where I come from, movement always has purpose: work, punishment, or transport to somewhere else." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Humans discovered long ago that sometimes the best purpose for movement is simply enjoying being alive. We call it recreation." The concept still felt strange to Zara, but she had to admit there was something peaceful about the sound of their footsteps on fallen leaves and the gentle whisper of wind through branches. She found herself noticing details she would never have been allowed to observe before: the intricate patterns of bark on different trees, the way sunlight filtered through the canopy, the distant sound of running water. "Marcus," she said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the path, "why did you really buy me from Vex?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because no one deserves to be treated as property, and because I recognized something in your eyes that reminded me of my sister." "Your sister?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then gestured to a fallen log beside the path. "Mind if we sit? It's a difficult story." Once they were seated, Marcus stared into the forest as he spoke. "My sister was captured by raiders when she was 17. They sold her to a mining operation on one of the outer worlds. By the time we found her 3 years later, she was—" He paused, struggling with the words. "She was broken in ways I couldn't understand. The physical injuries healed, but her spirit took much longer." Zara felt a strange tightness in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "What happened to her?" "She recovered, with time and patience and people who cared about her. She's actually one of the counselors here at Cedar Haven now. She helps others who have been through similar experiences." Marcus looked at Zara directly. "When I saw you on that ship, I saw the same look in your eyes that she had." the look of someone who had forgotten they were worth saving. The tightness in Zara's chest grew stronger, and she realized with shock that her eyes were filling with tears. She hadn't cried since her childhood, had learned long ago that tears only brought punishment. But here, with this human who spoke of her as if she had value, the emotions felt overwhelming. "I was told I was defective," she whispered, "that my inability to produce multiple offspring made me worthless, that my scars and imperfections meant no one would ever want me for anything but the most basic labor." Marcus's jaw tightened with anger, but his voice remained gentle. "The people who told you that were wrong. Your worth has nothing to do with your reproductive capacity or your appearance. You have value simply because you exist, because you think and feel and dream." "Dreams?" Zara laughed bitterly. "Slaves aren't allowed to dream." "You're not a slave anymore," Marcus reminded her. "What would you dream about, if you could?" The question caught her off guard. For so many years, survival had been her only goal. The idea of wanting something beyond basic existence seemed almost frightening in its impossibility. I don't know," she admitted. "I've never thought about it." "That's okay," Marcus said softly. "Dreams can develop over time, once you feel safe enough to imagine a future." They walked back to the facility in comfortable silence, but Zara's mind was churning with new thoughts. That evening, she found herself sitting on her cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Another resident, a young woman named Elena, who had arrived from a factory world, approached hesitantly. "Mind if I join you?" Elena asked. "The sunset is particularly beautiful tonight." Zara nodded, still not entirely comfortable with casual social interaction, but curious about this other survivor. Elena settled into the chair beside her with a content sigh. "I still can't believe I can just sit here and watch the sky change colors," Elena mused. "Back on Kepler Station, we never saw natural sunlight, just artificial day cycles in the manufacturing domes." "How long have you been here?" Zara asked. 4 months now. Sarah says I'm making good progress." Elena smiled, and Zara was struck by how genuine the expression seemed. "I'm learning to read and write in Standard Galactic. Marcus thinks I might be good at communications work." "They really don't expect anything in return?" Zara asked, voicing the question that still haunted her. "Nothing except that we try to heal," Elena confirmed. "Some residents choose to work in the gardens or help with facility maintenance, but it's always voluntary. Sarah says the goal is for us to eventually find our own paths in the galaxy, whether that's here on Earth or somewhere else entirely." The idea of choice, of multiple possible futures, still felt overwhelming to Zara. But seeing Elena's quiet confidence, her obvious growth from whatever trauma had brought her here, made it seem slightly more possible. Over the following days, Zara began to venture out of her cabin more often. She discovered the facility's library, a warm room filled with books, data pads, and comfortable reading chairs. The librarian, an elderly human named Robert, showed her how to access information about thousands of different topics. "Is there anything you're particularly curious about?" he asked, as he demonstrated the search functions. Zara hesitated, then said quietly, "I'd like to learn about other worlds, places where people are free." Robert's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Excellent choice. Let me show you some visual databases of worlds throughout the galaxy. You might be surprised by how many species have embraced concepts of individual liberty and dignity." For hours, Zara lost herself in images and descriptions of planets where all beings lived as equals, where strength was measured not by dominance but by compassion, where diversity was celebrated rather than exploited. She learned about the Centauri Republic, where former slaves had founded a government based on mutual aid. She read about the Crystal Gardens of Vega, where refugees from across the galaxy had created a sanctuary for healing and growth. "The universe is much larger than the small, cruel corners you've experienced," Robert said gently when she finally looked up from the displays. "There are billions of beings out there who believe in justice, kindness, and the inherent worth of every sentient creature." That evening, Zara sought out Marcus at the main building. She found him in the kitchen, helping prepare dinner for the residents. He looked up with his characteristic warm smile when she entered. "Zara, good to see you. How was your day?" "Educational," she replied, then hesitated. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Always. Why do humans care so much about freedom? I've been reading about your history, and it seems like you've fought many wars just to ensure everyone has the right to make their own choices." Marcus paused in his food preparation, considering the question seriously. "I think it's because we know what it feels like to be trapped," he said finally. "Every human has experienced moments of powerlessness, of being controlled by circumstances or other people. Most of us also know what it feels like when someone offers us genuine choice and respect. Once you've experienced true freedom, you can't bear to see others denied it." "But it would be easier to just ignore the suffering of others," Zara pointed out. "More profitable, certainly." Marcus nodded. "Easier in the short term, maybe. But humans learned long ago that a society built on the exploitation of others eventually destroys itself. When we lift others up, we all rise together." Dr. Sarah Mitchell entered the kitchen at that moment, carrying fresh vegetables from the garden. "Are you two having a philosophical discussion about human nature again?" she asked with amusement. "Zara was asking about our commitment to freedom," Marcus explained. Sarah set down her basket and looked at Zara with interest. "What prompted the question?" "I'm trying to understand how you can afford to help people like me," Zara said honestly. "In my experience, kindness is a luxury only the powerful can afford, and they rarely choose to spend it." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "That's a fair observation, and sadly true in many parts of the galaxy. But humans discovered something important during our own dark periods of history. Communities built on cooperation and mutual support are actually stronger and more prosperous than those based on domination and exploitation." She gestured around the kitchen, where several residents were working together to prepare the evening meal. "Look at what we've accomplished here. Everyone contributes according to their abilities. Everyone benefits according to their needs. The result is a place of healing and growth that serves a valuable purpose in the galaxy." "But surely you must profit somehow," Zara insisted, still struggling to accept that the facility existed purely for altruistic reasons. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a meaningful look, then Marcus spoke carefully. "Would you like to know the full truth about Cedar Haven's funding?" Zara nodded, bracing herself for the revelation of some hidden cost or obligation. "The facility is supported by a foundation established by former residents," Sarah explained. "People who healed here and went on to build successful lives throughout the galaxy. They send money, resources, and volunteers because they want others to have the same opportunities they received." The concept was so foreign to everything Zara had been taught about the nature of power and relationship that she felt slightly dizzy. "You mean they give back without being forced to?" "Many of them consider it the greatest privilege of their success," Marcus said simply. "The chance to break the cycle of exploitation and create something better." That night, lying in her comfortable bed and listening to the peaceful sounds of the forest, Zara allowed herself to imagine for the first time what it might feel like to be one of those former residents, to be fully healed, independent, maybe even successful enough to help others in turn. The dream felt impossibly distant, but for the first time since her childhood, it didn't feel entirely impossible. 6 months after her arrival at Cedar Haven, Zara stood in front of a mirror in her cabin, hardly recognizing the person looking back at her. Gone was the hollow-eyed, trembling creature who had stumbled off Vex's ship. In her place stood someone with clear skin, bright eyes, and most remarkably, a genuine smile. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been nightmares, panic attacks, and days when she couldn't bring herself to leave her room. But Marcus, Sarah, and the other staff had been patient with every setback, celebrating small victories and offering comfort during the dark moments. Today marked a special milestone. Zara had completed the Advanced Communications Training Program and was preparing for her first job interview with an interplanetary shipping company that had partnerships with ethical trade organizations. The position would involve coordinating humanitarian supply deliveries to developing worlds throughout the galaxy. "You look nervous," Elena observed as she entered Zara's cabin. The young woman had become Zara's closest friend at the facility, and their bond had helped both of them learn to trust again. "Terrified," Zara admitted, adjusting her simple but professional outfit for the third time. "What if they realize I'm defective? What if they change their minds?" Elena's expression grew firm. "Stop that right now. You are not defective. You're intelligent, compassionate, and hard-working. Any organization would be lucky to have you." A soft knock interrupted them, and Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Ready for the big day?" Zara took a deep breath and nodded. Over the months, Marcus had become more than just her rescuer. He had become a trusted friend and mentor. His steady presence and unwavering belief in her potential had been crucial to her healing process. "I've been thinking," she said as they walked toward the transport that would take her to the spaceport. "If this job works out, I want to start sending money back to support Cedar Haven." Marcus smiled. "That's generous of you, but you should focus on building your own life first." "The foundation will always be here." "That's just it," Zara replied, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "This place, what you've all done for me, it's shown me that there's another way to live. I want to be part of that change, not just a beneficiary of it." The interview took place aboard the orbital station, where Galactic Humanitarian Services maintained their regional headquarters. Zara had never been off-planet since arriving on Earth, and the view of the blue marble suspended in space below took her breath away. The interviewer was a Telexian named Crix, whose species was known for their analytical minds and straightforward communication style. Zara found his directness refreshing after months of careful human diplomacy. "Your application indicates you have personal experience with trafficking and exploitation," Crix stated without preamble. "How does this qualify you for a position in humanitarian logistics?" Zara had practiced answering this question, but sitting across from a potential employer, the words felt more significant. "Because I understand what it means to be powerless, to have no voice or choice in your own life. I know firsthand how important it is that aid reaches the people who need it most, not just those with the power to demand it." Crix's crystalline features remained impassive, but his follow-up questions suggested genuine interest. "The position requires travel to worlds where conditions may be dangerous or uncomfortable. You would be working with local populations to ensure supply distributions are fair and efficient. Are you prepared for such responsibilities?" "I've lived through worse conditions than anything you could assign me," Zara replied honestly. "And I've learned that the most dangerous situations are often where help is needed most desperately." The interview continued for nearly an hour, covering logistics protocols, cultural sensitivity training, and emergency procedures. When it concluded, Crix stood and extended his hand in the human custom that had become standard for interspecies professional interactions. "We will contact you within 3 standard days with our decision," he said. "I must note that your responses demonstrated both practical knowledge and genuine commitment to our mission. These qualities are rare and valuable." On the transport back to Earth, Zara felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. The interview had gone well, But the prospect of actually leaving Cedar Haven, of stepping into the wider galaxy as an independent being, felt overwhelming. Marcus seemed to sense her internal struggle. Having second thoughts? Not about the job, Zara said carefully, but about whether I'm really ready for independence. What if I fail? What if I'm not as healed as I think I am? Failure is always a possibility, Marcus replied gently. But so is success, growth, and making a real difference in the galaxy. The skills you've learned here, the confidence you've built, those don't disappear just because you leave our protected environment. 2 days later, Zara received the call. She had been accepted for the position and would begin training immediately at the organization's main facility on Mars. As she disconnected the communication device, her hands were shaking with excitement and terror in equal measure. The farewell gathering that evening was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. The entire Cedar Haven community came together to celebrate her achievement and wish her well. There were speeches, shared memories, and even tears from people who had become her chosen family. Dr. Sarah presented her with a small pendant made from earth wood. So you'll always remember that you have a home here, no matter where your journey takes you. Elena hugged her tightly. Promise you'll stay in touch, and promise you'll remember that you're worth every good thing that comes your way. But it was Marcus's words that stayed with her as she prepared to leave the next morning. When I first saw you on Vex's ship, I saw someone who had been told she was worthless. Now I see someone who knows her own value and is ready to share it with the galaxy. That transformation didn't happen because we rescued you. It happened because you chose to heal, to grow, to believe in yourself again. The transport to the spaceport was bittersweet. Zara watched the forests and mountains of her sanctuary fade into the distance. But for the first time, she wasn't leaving as cargo or property. She was leaving as a free being with her own purpose and destination. Her first assignment with Galactic Humanitarian Services took her to Theta Rigel, a mining world where the collapse of the primary extraction operation had left thousands of workers stranded without resources. Zara's job was to coordinate the distribution of food, medical supplies, and temporary shelter materials while longer-term relocation efforts were organized. The conditions were harsh, but Zara found herself energized by the work. Her ability to connect with desperate people, to understand their fears and needs from personal experience, made her exceptionally effective at ensuring aid reached those who needed it most. On her third week on Theta Rigel, she encountered a transport ship carrying a cargo hold full of trafficking victims rescued from a raided slave market. The survivors were traumatized, frightened, and had nowhere to go. Local authorities were overwhelmed and considering simply shipping them to refugee camps, where they would likely disappear into another form of exploitation. Zara stood in the cargo bay, looking at faces that mirrored her own expression from less than a year ago, and made a decision that would define her future. She opened her personal communication device and contacted Marcus on Earth. I need to establish a partner facility, she said without preamble when his face appeared on the screen. There are people here who need what Cedar Haven gave me, but they can't travel to Earth for help. Marcus's smile was radiant. Tell me what you need. Within 6 months, Zara had established New Haven on Theta Rigel, funded through a combination of her growing salary, donations from Cedar Haven's foundation network, and partnerships with local organizations that had witnessed her work firsthand. The facility followed the same principles as its parent organization, healing through dignity, choice, and community support. A year later, she stood in the main building of New Haven watching as Corin, a young Andorian male who had been rescued from gladiator rings, taught basic literacy to a group of recently arrived survivors. Through the window, she could see the facility's gardens, where residents grew food and found peace in nurturing growing things. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Marcus's face appeared on the screen, and behind him, she could see the familiar warmth of Cedar Haven's main hall. "How are things at New Haven?" he asked with the same gentle interest he had always shown. "Growing," Zara replied, and realized how much meaning that single word carried. "We've helped 47 people so far, and 23 have moved on to independent lives. 3 others are establishing their own partner facilities on other worlds." "I'm proud of you," Marcus said simply. "But more importantly, you should be proud of yourself." After the call ended, Zara walked out onto the facility's main terrace, where she could see the binary sunset painting the sky in brilliant purples and golds. New residents often gathered here in the evenings, still learning to appreciate beauty for its own sake. A young Zephyrian female approached hesitantly. She had arrived just 3 days ago from a breeding station remarkably similar to the one where Zara had been rejected. Her medical records indicated genetic variations that made her unsuitable for reproduction, and she still flinched whenever anyone moved too quickly near her. "Zara?" the girl said quietly. "I wanted to thank you. For the first time since I was captured, I actually believe the people who tell me I'm safe." Zara smiled, remembering her own disbelief when Marcus had first spoken those words to her. "You are safe," she confirmed. "And more than that, you're valuable. Not for what others can take from you, but for who you choose to become." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zara reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been rejected as defective, sold as damaged goods, purchased by someone who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Now she stood as the director of an organization that had given dozens of people the chance to discover their own value. The breeding stations had declared her unfit for reproduction, but she had become something far more important: a creator of hope, a builder of new futures, a living proof that no one is ever truly worthless. In the distance, she could hear laughter from the residential quarters, where survivors were learning to trust again, to dream again, to believe in tomorrow again. It was the most beautiful sound in any galaxy, and she had helped make it possible. Marcus had been right all those months ago. She had been worth saving. But more than that, she had been worth believing in, worth investing in, worth giving the chance to discover what she could become when treated not as property, but as a queen of her own destiny.